In today's Whiteboard Leadership Moment, we're going to talk about one of the four cornerstones of culture. Culture is the defining set of attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors of a given group of people. And every culture is very, very different and very, very important. Today we want to talk about training. Training is so important. We've talked at a different whiteboard about motivation. Motivation will inspire people to do something once, but training helps them do it over and over, helps them to be consistent. And it answers the question, how? How do I do this? For example, there's a lot of churches that talk about being generous, and yet they never have any kind of training for people who are in debt. And they'll come back and say, listen, Pastor, I agree with everything you said, but I don't know how I got into debt. I definitely don't know how to get out of debt. So who's going to help me? Who's going to train me to do this? Motivation without training is almost a complete waste of time. So how can we develop training? Here's some thoughts to think about. The first is this: help them diagnose before prescribing. If people, for example, don't realize they're not prayerful, they won't be able to recognize it and won't see the need. It's just like someone doesn't learn how to change a tire until the tire goes flat. So how do you help them recognize that they're not generous, that they're not kind, that they're not studying Scripture correctly, that whatever the training is that you want them to do, help them diagnose before prescribing. Use the power of timing. There are certain times of life where we're more engaged and more likely to join into a training time. For example, right before you get married, you're much more interested in a relationship kind of training or series. You're also probably more interested in finances and how to do finances correctly. So use the power of timing. Where you lack discipline, add structure. Here's something that a lot of people deal with. They want to do the right thing, but they're just not disciplined in it. They want to have a study time every morning in the Bible. They want to learn how to pray or how to share their faith, but they lack discipline. And so what structures can you add in order to help them do that? For example, you could incorporate something in every weekend that talks about generosity or talks about prayerfulness or talks about evangelistic effort. Where they lack discipline, add structure as a reminder to help them move the right direction. Whatever training you do, make it practical, repeatable, and transferable. Practical because they have to see the value of it. Repeatable because it's not just this one situation. They need to be able to do it over and over again. And reproducible, transferable, in that so they can train others to do it. It's not just me learning, it's now me helping others to go on the journey with me. Design it holistically. And what I mean by that is that very often in churches, when we have training, it's either content-driven, or it's relationship-driven, or it's application-driven. You want one that has good content, it shows how to do it in relationship, and is application-oriented outside of the group of training that you're working with. Consider developing seasons of alignment. This is a catalytic idea. That idea is that what if we got everyone talking about this? What if we got everyone focused on the same thing? What if children's ministry, student ministries, and adult ministries all had the same conversation and all focused in the same direction? And consider having a season of alignment. Maybe it's just a series where you're talking about this subject, whether it be evangelism or prayer or worship or generosity or whatever else it may be. What if you had just a whole season where that was the one conversation that the entire church had? That would be catalytic in moving these people forward in the area of training. Think beyond that. Think beyond those times of alignment. Think beyond waves to tides. A whole lot of time what happens in church, I'll use generosity for example. We'll have a generosity series and we'll challenge people for 4 weeks to be generous, and then we'll go 11 months without ever talking about it again, or without ever helping them make the next step. And that's really the question you ask here is, what's the next step? Now that we talked about it on the weekend, what's their next step? How do we train them? How do we encourage them? How do we help them? If they've been discipled to a certain level, how do we get them to the next level? If they become a follower, how do we help them become a servant? If they become a servant, how do we help them become a leader? Think about the next steps and think about tides, raising the tide of the church and not just doing waves of occasionally talking about things. And then finally, this is most important, figure out how to win the dinner table. If you capture the dinner table conversation of a family, where a mother and a father and a teenager and an elementary school kid are talking about the same subject, you'll galvanize this movement in the life of the home, which really is where the church has its greatest strength, is in the family. And so I encourage you to learn how to train people and take these different principles and apply them to your lives. This has been a Converge Whiteboard Leadership Moment. To learn more about Converge or to join us, check out converge.org.